The chilling tendrils of the Alaskan winter clawed at Dr. Evelyn Hart's soul long before her plane touched down. Black Hollow, an abandoned logging town nestled deep within the unforgiving wilderness, promised to be the perfect, desolate canvas for her research. As a seasoned anthropologist, Evelyn had delved into countless indigenous myths, but the whispers of the shadow in the pines, a creature rumored to be more spirit than flesh, resonated with a deeper, more primal fear. She dismissed it, of course, as the natural human inclination to personify the unknown. A scholarly skepticism she'd cultivated after a past research trip had scarred her, leaving her wary of the irrational. This journey was about collecting data, documenting folklore, and perhaps finally, silencing the persistent echoes of her own professional trauma. Her assistant, Mia Torres, however, saw Black Hollow through a different lens. Mia, a vibrant 27-year-old vlogger, was utterly captivated by the sensational potential of their expedition. Her obsession with Bigfoot wasn't just academic. It was a fervent belief, a quest to unearth tangible proof for her ever-growing online audience. While Evelyn meticulously cataloged ancient texts and tribal histories, Mia envisioned viral videos, her camera perpetually at the ready, a technological shield against the encroaching silence. The stark contrast in their approaches created a subtle tension, a quiet hum beneath the surface of their shared purpose. Their guide, Lucas Bain, a man forged from the unforgiving Alaskan landscape, met them at the nearest outpost, his weathered face a roadmap of past struggles. A traumatic military past etched lines around his eyes, and a quiet intensity radiated from him. He possessed an intimate knowledge of these treacherous woods, born not just from experience, but from something deeper, a connection he rarely spoke of. His warnings about Black Hollow were delivered with a gravity that went beyond mere caution. There was a flicker of something akin to fear in his gaze, a fleeting shadow he quickly suppressed. He spoke of old legends, of a time when the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. The journey into Black Hollow was a slow, arduous crawl through a landscape swallowed by an endless white expanse. Snow-laden evergreens loomed on either side, their branches heavy with the weight of winter, creating a perpetually twilight world. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of their snowmobiles and the distant, mournful cry of the wind. Evelyn felt an unsettling pressure in the air, a sense of being watched, but she attributed it to the isolation, the sheer magnitude of the untouched wilderness pressing in. Her rational mind sought explanations, even as her instincts screamed otherwise. Upon entering Black Hollow, the desolation was absolute. Dilapidated cabins, skeletal remains of a forgotten community, stood as silent sentinels, their windows like vacant eyes staring out at the snow. A decade had passed since the logging town had been abruptly abandoned, A hasty exodus following a string of gruesome deaths that had been sensationalized in the few news reports that had reached the outside world. The air hung heavy with the palpable weight of untold stories of lives abruptly ended, leaving behind only the ghosts of memories that their first foray into the abandoned dwellings yielded unsettling discoveries. Remnants of old camps, hastily abandoned, hinted at a desperate flight. Scattered among the debris, Evelyn found fragmented journals, their pages brittle with age, some stained with a dark, unidentifiable substance that she disturbingly suspected was blood. The scrawled entries spoke of creeping dread, of an unseen presence, and of an insidious hunger that gnawed at the sanity of the ill-fated loggers. The air in these cabins felt thick, as if the fear of the previous inhabitants still lingered. A phantom chill that no amount of modern heating could dispel as they ventured deeper into the surrounding forest. The atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Strange wooden effigies, crudely carved and resembling distorted human figures, hung from the branches of ancient pines. They swayed gently in the icy breeze, their blank faces seeming to track Evelyn's movements, their limbs twisted in grotesque poses. Lucas explained them as old warding totems, meant to deter malevolent spirits, but the effect was precisely the opposite. They felt less like protection and more like an ominous welcome, an unsettling premonition of what awaited them. That first night in their makeshift cabin, nestled amongst the skeletal remains of the town, the eerie howls began. Long, drawn-out wails that echoed through the snow-covered silence, sending shivers down Evelyn's spine. Mia, ever the optimist, declared them to be wolves, a natural sound of the wild. Lucas, however, remained silent, his gaze fixed on the dense, shadowed tree line, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Evelyn tried to convince herself it was merely the wind, a trick of the acoustics in the vast, empty landscape, but a primal part of her knew otherwise. The following morning, the illusion of normalcy shattered. They found the first shredded carcass near the edge of the woods. It was a deer, torn apart with a ferocity that defied any known predator. Limbs were twisted at unnatural angles, and the flesh had been ripped away in jagged strips, exposing bone. There was no clean kill, no neat consumption. This was a brutal, dismembering act, a display of raw, unrestrained violence. The air around. The carcass was thick with the scent of blood and something else. Something acrid and metallic that Evelyn couldn't place as Evelyn examined the grotesque scene. A chill colder than the Alaskan air seeped into her bones. The scientific detachment she usually maintained began to crack. This wasn't the work of a wolf or even a bear. The sheer destructive power, the seemingly ritualistic nature of the dismemberment, hinted at something far more sinister. Mia, her vlogging camera forgotten for once, looked utterly horrified, her usual bravado replaced by a genuine fear that mirrored Evelyn's own. Lucas, grim-faced, simply stated, "It's back." The discovery of the dismembered deer irrevocably shifted the atmosphere from academic pursuit to desperate survival. The casual dismissals of local lore vanished, replaced by a gnawing dread that clung to them like the persistent Alaskan snow. Evelyn, ever the pragmatist, forced herself to meticulously examine the remains, searching for claw marks, bite patterns, anything that could offer a rational explanation. But the evidence was contradictory, unsettling. The sheer force involved suggested something immense, but the precision of some tears hinted at an intelligence far beyond a mere animal. Mia, the vlogger, found herself drawn to the macabre. Instead of filming, she meticulously documented the scene with her still camera, her fingers trembling slightly. Her eyes, usually bright with curiosity, now held a haunted, almost manic glint. The Bigfoot she had chased was a vague, mythical creature. This was something tangible, terrifying, and utterly real. The fear was intoxicating to her, a morbid fascination that overruled her survival instincts. She whispered about the truth, her voice laced with an unhealthy obsession that made Evelyn deeply uneasy. Lucas, meanwhile, became a shadow. He moved with a heightened sense of awareness, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line, his hand never far from the hunting rifle. He now carried openly. He spoke in clipped sentences, his previous reserve hardening into a wall of stoicism. Evelyn caught him several times staring into the deepening shadows, a look of profound despair etched on his face, as if he recognized something in the vast, silent wilderness that she could not yet comprehend. His local knowledge, once a reassuring comfort, now felt like a burden, a premonition. That night, the howls returned, closer this time, and laced with a new, horrifying quality. They weren't just animalistic. There was a guttural, almost human cadence to them, a distorted symphony of hunger and rage. Evelyn clutched her research notes, the academic explanation she'd once held so dear crumbling around her. She tried to rationalize, to find a scientific basis for the sounds, but the primal fear in her gut screamed otherwise. These were not wolves. These were something far worse. As the days bled into one another, marked only by the perpetual gloom of the Alaskan winter, the psychological toll began to mount. Evelyn started losing time. She would find herself in the small, cramped cabin, her hands meticulously organizing notes, only to suddenly realize she had no memory of the past hour, or even longer. Short, fragmented flashes of dark swaying trees, and the acrid smell of pine would intrude, leaving her disoriented and deeply unsettled. She feared she was succumbing to the isolation, the crushing monotony of the endless winter. Mia's obsession intensified. Despite the escalating danger, she would venture out alone, her camera always recording, whispering to her unseen audience about the proof she was gathering. She spoke of a powerful being, a creature that moved with impossible speed, a being she was determined to capture on film, even if it cost her everything. Evelyn tried to rein her in, to explain the very real dangers, but Mia's focus had narrowed, her gaze fixed on the elusive shadow she believed held the answers to her long-held beliefs. Lucas confessed. One frigid evening, as the wind howled like a banshee around their cabin, he finally broke his silence. He had seen it before years ago, when he was younger, a hunting trip gone horribly wrong. The creature, a towering black mass of shadow and muscle, had cornered him, its eyes glowing with an ancient malevolence, but it had spared him. It had simply observed him, then vanished into the snow. He believed he was marked, that his survival was not a fluke, but a deliberate act, and that the creature was now back to claim what it was owed. The paranoia settled in like a thick, suffocating fog. With Lucas's confession, a new, insidious fear began to fester. Could one of them be compromised? Could the creature, the shadow in the pines, exert some unseen influence, slowly twisting their minds, turning them against each other? Evelyn watched Mia with a newfound suspicion, her assistant's manic obsession suddenly seeming less like bravery and more like a terrifying vulnerability. She also found herself scrutinizing Lucas, his quiet intensity now reinterpreted as a potential harbored secret. The supernatural elements began to manifest with chilling regularity. The Bigfoot creature, whenever glimpses were caught, seemed to bleed black mist, tendrils of shadow coiling around its hulking form. Compasses spun wildly whenever they neared certain parts of the forest, their needles dancing frantically as if caught in a magnetic maelstrom. The trees themselves seemed to shift, their forms blurring at the periphery of their vision, and the howling blizzards began to whisper names, distorted and guttural, carried on the icy winds, sometimes even their own, but particularly harrowing. Night, the air within their cabin turned frigid, the warmth of the roaring fire suddenly inconsequential. Ghostly apparitions began to flicker at the edges of their vision. Translucent figures, vaguely human, but with eyes that held an ancient, sorrowful despair. They whispered, their voices a cacophony of pleas and warnings, a chilling symphony of the damned. They spoke of hunger, of the cursed one, and of the true form. Their words burrowed into Evelyn's mind, twisting her dreams into grotesque nightmares filled with ravenous shadows and endless, gnawing hunger, the most horrifying. Discovery, however, came unexpectedly. Deep within a snowdrift, near the remnants of an old trapper's camp, Lucas uncovered a discarded, water-damaged camcorder. Its battery miraculously still held a faint charge. With trembling hands, Evelyn managed to retrieve the footage. What played on the small flickering screen was a lost hiker, his voice filled with an initial, almost delusional optimism that rapidly devolved into raw, unadulterated terror. The final moments were unbearable. The hiker's screams, the sound of tearing flesh, and the wet, sickening crunch of bones as he was eaten alive, piece by piece. The Wendigo's insatiable hunger was not a myth. It was a horrifying reality. The horror of the found footage left them shattered. The hiker's final agonizing moments replayed in Evelyn's mind, a gruesome loop that stripped away any remaining pretense of academic detachment. The Wendigo was not just a creature of legend. It was a predatory force of unspeakable cruelty, its hunger a tangible, suffocating presence that now seemed to permeate the very air of Black Hollow. The cold became more intense, the silence more menacing, and every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind, was amplified into a harbinger of doom. Mia, instead of being terrified into submission, became more erratic, more desperately obsessed. The footage, instead of deterring her, fueled her manic drive to capture the creature on film. She spoke of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, her eyes wide and unblinking, her face gaunt from lack of sleep and the relentless fear that now consumed them all. Evelyn tried to reason with her, to impress upon her the gravity of their situation. But Mia seemed to exist in a terrifying bubble of her own making, her focus narrowed to a singular dangerous objective. The creature's attacks became more frequent, more brazen. They found more victims, not always human, but always bearing the same gruesome hallmarks. Bodies torn apart, dismembered with brutal efficiency, and unsettlingly, often left in ritualistic poses with antlers jammed into their skulls. It was a terrifying display of power, a grotesque message sent from the shadows, mocking their attempts at understanding, reveling in their fear. The snow around these scenes was stained a sickening crimson, the metallic tang of blood heavy in the frigid air. One harrowing night, the crunching of heavy footsteps circled their cabin. It was an unmistakable sound, distinct from any animal they knew, rhythmic and deliberate, as if something was patiently stalking them, biding its time. They huddled together, weapons at the ready, listening to the horrifying symphony of their impending doom. But when dawn broke, there was nothing. No tracks, no sign of what had tormented them. The only evidence was the lingering chill in the air and the collective, bone-deep terror that had seeped into their very souls. Then, the whispers began inside the cabin. At first, Evelyn dismissed them as auditory hallucinations, a byproduct of sleep deprivation and extreme stress. But the voices grew clearer, distinct, and unsettlingly personal. They spoke her name, Lucas's name, Mia's name, weaving unsettling narratives of their pasts, their fears, their secret desires. They hinted at betrayal, at hidden truths, slowly eroding their trust in one another, turning their own minds against them. Paranoia, once a mere suggestion, now became a suffocating reality. In her moments of clarity, Evelyn pored over the tattered journals from the abandoned camps, searching for any clue, any piece of information that could explain the horror unfolding around them. She uncovered fragmented accounts of a trapper, a man driven to the brink by the brutal Alaskan winter, who in his desperation resorted to cannibalizing his crew. The journals described his subsequent transformation, his body warping, his hunger becoming insatiable, his mind consumed by a malevolent spirit. The Wendigo, Evelyn realized with a sickening lurch, was not just a monster. It was a curse, a horrifying consequence of human depravity. Lucas, his face etched with grim determination, revealed another piece of the puzzle. He spoke of an ancient prophecy passed down through generations of local tribes. The Wendigo, they believed, could only be truly contained by a blood sacrifice, a willing vessel to trap the malevolent spirit within. The alternative was a horrifying cycle. The spirit would simply possess another host, another creature, continuing its reign of terror. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, offering a terrifying choice: sacrifice or become the next victim, or worse, the next vessel. Mia disappeared. One morning, the cabin felt unnervingly silent. Her camera was gone, her gear meticulously packed, but Mia herself was nowhere to be found. A frantic search revealed only her distinctive footprints, leading out into the endless snow, growing fainter and fainter until they vanished entirely. A cold dread settled in Evelyn's stomach. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Mia had gone hunting for the beast one last time. Lucas looked at Evelyn, his eyes filled with a shared, unspoken dread. They found her. 2 days later, the scene was a tableau of unspeakable horror, a grotesque mockery of human life. Mia was half alive, her body brutally gutted, pinned to a massive pine tree with sharpened antlers driven through her limbs. Her eyes, still wide and staring, held a flicker of recognition as Evelyn knelt beside her. With her last dying breath, a gurgling whisper escaped her lips, her voice barely audible over the relentless wind. "It's wearing his face," she choked out, her gaze fixed not on Evelyn, but on Lucas, who stood frozen, his face a mask of unspeakable horror. Then, Mia's eyes went blank. The revelation shattered Evelyn. Lucas, her trusted guide, her stoic companion, was somehow connected, intrinsically linked to the creature. Mia's dying words, "It's wearing his face," echoed in her mind, a terrifying puzzle piece that clicked into place with horrifying precision. Lucas had been spared before. He knew the creature intimately. And now, the paranoia that had been a creeping whisper became a deafening scream. Was he possessed? Was he helping the creature? Or was he perhaps the new vessel? Mia's brutal ritualistic death ripped away the last vestiges of Evelyn's sanity, leaving her raw and exposed to the full, unadulterated horror of Black Hollow. The chilling words, "It's wearing his face," echoed endlessly in her mind, turning her gaze on Lucas with a terrifying new understanding. His stoicism now seemed like a mask, his silence a shroud for an unspeakable truth. The air in the cabin, once a tenuous refuge, now felt thick with suspicion, the unspoken accusation hanging heavy between them. Lucas, reeling from Mia's dying accusation, was a broken man. The stoic facade crumbled, revealing a soul racked with guilt and a terrifying, dawning realization. He finally confessed, his voice a hoarse whisper. The creature that had spared him years ago was not a benevolent entity. It was the Wendigo. And in its twisted game, it had left him with a living scar, a mental tether that allowed it to enter his mind, to subtly influence his thoughts, to wear his face when it chose to toy with its victims. He was not possessed, not entirely, but he was undeniably a conduit, a tool in its gruesome game. The last night descended upon Black Hollow with a ferocity that matched the escalating terror. The blizzard howled, a symphony of dread, burying the abandoned town in impenetrable white shroud. The Wendigo, emboldened by its recent kills, no longer stalked in the shadows. Its massive, shadowy form moved openly around the cabin, its guttural roars shaking the very foundations, a declaration of its imminent arrival. Evelyn knew with a terrifying certainty that this was the final confrontation. Evelyn, desperate for any chance of survival, delved into the remaining pages of the blood-stained journals, a frantic search for an escape. The ancient lore spoke of a perilous choice: to destroy the creature's current physical form and risk releasing the Wendigo spirit, allowing it to find a new host and continue its reign of terror, or to offer a blood sacrifice, a willing vessel to trap the spirit, thereby containing the evil within a new living prison. The choice was agonizing, a horrifying moral dilemma in the face of absolute despair. The realization struck Evelyn with the force of a physical blow. The only way to survive, to truly end the cycle of horror, was to become the new vessel. To offer herself a living sacrifice to contain the ancient evil, to be its prison for all eternity. The thought was repulsive, terrifying, but it was the only path to break the cycle, to prevent the Wendigo from claiming more innocent lives, from spreading its insatiable hunger across the frozen wilderness. It was a sacrifice of self, a complete, surrender to the very evil she had sought to understand. Lucas, seeing the grim determination in her eyes, pleaded with her. He understood the desperate logic, but he couldn't bear the thought of another life consumed by the creature. He offered himself, his own tortured soul, as the vessel, a twisted act of penance for his unwitting role in the creature's dark game. But Evelyn knew, deep in her gut, that this was her burden to bear. Her final, terrifying research subject, a macabre experiment to save humanity from an ancient, relentless evil. The Wendigo finally breached the cabin. Its immense, shadowy form filled the doorway, its eyes glowing with a malevolent, ancient hunger. The black mist that bled from its skin writhed and coiled, filling the air with a suffocating chill. Its presence alone was enough to crush the will to force submission. But Evelyn, fueled by a desperate, unwavering resolve, stood her ground. This was the moment of reckoning, the culmination of all the horrors she had witnessed, all the secrets she had unearthed. With a primal scream, Evelyn lunged, not with a weapon, but with a desperate, reckless plan fueled by the ancient lore. She had doused the cabin in the few remaining gallons of kerosene they had, a desperate, final resort. As the Wendigo lunged, she ignited the cabin, the flames erupting with a ferocious roar, engulfing the creature in a fiery inferno. The Wendigo shrieked, a sound of agony and fury, as the ancient evil was consumed by the purifying flames. The cabin became a funeral pyre, a blazing beacon against the endless night. Evelyn, barely escaping the inferno, collapsed in the snow. Her body racked with pain and exhaustion, her mind a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The creature was gone. The immediate threat was vanquished. Lucas, battered but alive, dragged her away from the consuming flames, his eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and a lingering, profound sorrow. The silence that followed the roar of the fire was almost deafening, a hollow void where the creature's terrifying presence had once dominated Dot as the first rays of a weak, anemic dawn pierced the Alaskan gloom. A rescue helicopter finally appeared. On the horizon, a beacon of hope in the desolate landscape. Evelyn was airlifted out, her body battered, her mind scarred, but alive. The long journey back to civilization was a blur of pain and exhaustion, punctuated by fragmented memories of Black Hollow, of the horrors she had witnessed and the impossible choice she had made. The Wendigo, she believed, was gone, its reign of terror finally brought to an end. But as the helicopter sliced through the frigid air, high above the endless expanse of snow-covered pines, a small, subtle flicker emanated from Evelyn's pack. Inside, her night vision camera, still recording, captured a chilling image. It showed her own eyes, glowing with a faint, malevolent green, watching herself from the dark recesses of the ancient snow-laden trees below. The Wendigo wasn't gone. It had simply changed its skin. Evelyn Hart, the brilliant anthropologist, had become its new vessel, its living prison. A terrifying new chapter in the horrifying legend of the Wendigo shadow that had just begun.